Hello and welcome into our second, we'll call it information interview session with Dr. Scott Elliott, Superintendent of Watauga County Schools. I'm Kenneth Reese, the founder, owner, and operator of WataugaOnline.com, and probably the most talked about topic, not only here in Watauga County, statewide, and even nationwide, are schools and the return of schools. There's a lot to get to. We asked for your questions via Facebook about the return to school, and we got a lot of them. A couple of weeks ago, we actually asked for questions and had well over 100. And then, like everything else with COVID-19, things changed and changed dramatically. So we resubmitted your request for questions. We have them, and Dr. Elliott's kind enough to spend his Tuesday morning, this is Tuesday, August the 4th, with us to help get us all on the same page and get ready to go back to school now within a couple of days. So good morning as of this recording, Dr. Elliott, and thanks for being with us again.
Hello, Kenneth. It's always good to see you. Thanks for having me back.
All right, I'm going to let you kind of take the reins here and go with it. Give us the overview now of what has happened, and then we'll start diving into some of these questions as needed.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for fielding all those questions and helping all of our parents and community just to stay so informed. I appreciate it. And as you said, when we opened here, not just here locally, but in North Carolina and nationwide, it seems like in the last 2 weeks, the attention and the focus around our response to COVID has squared up with the return to school. And so every school system in the United States and certainly North Carolina is having these same conversations and making these same decisions. And after the governor made his announcement back in July that schools could open under a Plan B, which is moderate social distancing, or a Plan C, all remote, the plan that we put into place is what we've been describing as our 2x3 flex model, where half students would come for 2 days at a time in school. But it didn't take long, just a couple of weeks after that, to realize that our local numbers were going up, that the percentage of positive tests was staying above that 5% threshold as recommended by the CDC for recommending schools. And in consulting with our health department director, our Board of Education asked me to come back with some additional options and recommendations for them. And we are now still in a Plan B with some students, our most high needs students, coming to campus periodically for some services, but the vast majority of students starting school remotely for the first 9 weeks. And it's not where we want it to be. We do want our students to be back in school in person. And hopefully, and we'll probably talk about this through some of the questions, that we'll begin to see the changes in the local community metrics that will help us to get our students back into school around the middle of October. Appreciate everybody's patience with us as we work through this. And I know there are a lot of questions, and as we record this, decisions that parents are making. And hopefully, either through this interview or just phone calls and emails to our office, we can help to answer all of those questions and help our parents and our students to get ready for the first day of school, which is August the 17th.
Yeah, and a majority of the questions, of course, deal with the remote plans, the virtual academy. And I think if you can just kind of summarize all of that together, we can actually get to a bulk of the questions right there, because, folks want to know, how is this going to be different than what we were dealing with from March to May, et cetera. So I'll let you kind of go from there.
Yeah, thank you. I think that is a great way to take in a lot of the questions that you received about the differences between the in-person 2x3 flex model and the all virtual Watauga Virtual Academy, now that all students are starting the first 9 weeks remotely, or most students are. So I just want to say, first of all, that again, I appreciate everyone's patience with us as we work through this. The governor and the state did direct school systems to create an all remote option, especially for students, families, and teachers who had chronic health conditions that might put them at a higher risk for returning to school. We did that. We have 926 students who have applied and are enrolled in our Watauga Virtual Academy so far that I know of. We've been able to schedule and accommodate every student. But it's quite complex. And so I just want to explain a little bit of the differences that will help some of the parents to understand those differences, and for those who are enrolled in the Watauga Virtual Academy to help them decide if that is still the right track for them. So right now, with all students starting remotely, there's very little distinction between what would have been the all remote 2x3 and the Watauga Virtual Academy. All students during their remote instruction period will have a 2-by-3 instructional model, which means whether they're in the virtual academy or enrolled, in what would have been in-person instruction in their school, now remotely, they will spend 2 days for the majority of a school day directly engaging with their teachers online. And the amount of time that a student will be online will be different, with smaller amounts for the younger students, with longer amounts up through middle school and high school. On average, I think that students might expect to engage with their teacher online from about 8 a.m. to 2:30. We're going to try to replicate a school day, and probably about 4 hours or so of direct time on the computer. And we know we do not want students sitting in front of their computer for hours and hours on end, but we also need students to be engaged with their teachers. So again, whether they are in the virtual academy or whether they are on the remote start that would have been in person, 2 days will be directly engaging with a teacher, and 3 days will be doing those assignments and activities. Some of them will be online, some of them will be offline, that will be follow-up from the time that they were with their teachers. Now, I also want to point out that the Wednesdays have been specifically designed so that teachers can have meetings, virtual meetings with their students, so that they could pull together the groups of students who normally wouldn't interact with each other. The half of students might be Monday, Tuesday, with the half of students that might be Thursday, Friday. So some optional Google Meets and small group sessions and things like that on Wednesday. But the point here is that both groups are following a very similar instructional schedule, with 2 days of interaction with a teacher, followed by 3 days where they are working remotely on assignments provided by their teachers, some of those online, some of them not. So that is not a distinction between the two. Now, there is a distinction, and we tried to make this clear to folks, that we're trying to provide the all remote Watauga Virtual Academy students every option possible. But because 80% of our students are still scheduled in their in-person classes at their school, it's been very difficult to provide all of the electives and all of the exploratory courses that a student might need. Now, the high school has done a great job of trying to provide as many electives as possible in addition to graduation requirements, but that is one of the differences. So primarily, the difference, Kenneth, is the virtual academy is for families and students who know that from right now, they know that they need or want to stay remote for the entire semester. And those who are choosing the in-person 2-by-3 model, which is now remote for 9 weeks, are signing up with the understanding that we might be back. We hopefully will be back in person in the middle of October. That's the difference.
You talk about being back in October, and let me back up here 1 second. For the viewer, I'll apologize for lack of a better term. I think we have a little bit of a sound glitch going on at times. So if you'll just bear with us, that's as we record this through Zoom, a lot of folks are still using that platform. So you may see a little glitch here or there, and hopefully that'll even itself out. You talk about, we're going to try to go through some of these questions, maybe not everyone, because Dr. Elliott just answered a lot of them right there. You talk about the middle of October. I hate to jump that far ahead. That seems so far ahead, but what would we need? What would you need to see to make that decision to return to in-person instruction in October? That was one of the questions submitted, by the way.
Yeah, I think that may be one of the best questions and also most difficult questions to ask or to answer. And we were faced with this decision 2 weeks ago. What are the metrics that we need to determine whether or not it's safe to go back to in-person instruction for the majority of students? What do we need to see in October to feel that it's safe to do that? We know that there are risks. There are risks to having our students mostly staying at home. They need to be in school. We also know that there are risks right now with the level of community spread of the virus that we're seeing by having them come back in school. We have to figure out what is that right balance. So as a community, it isn't just the school system. We're just one part of our community. We need to see a leveling off and a declining in the number of overall cases day to day and week to week. We look at that rolling 14-day average. We also need to see a decline in the percentage of tests that are positive. I mentioned a minute ago that the CDC recommends that around 5% positive is a safe target for for community spread and returning students to school with all those safety precautions that we've talked about previously. Right now in Watauga County, we've come down to around the 6 and 7% mark. And as a state, we've come down to around the 8% mark. So that right now is headed in the right direction. Right now, as of this morning, with over 270 positive cases in Watauga County, we're seeing a doubling in our positive cases about every 2 weeks. And that is a frightening rate of positive cases. We need to see that slowing down and declining. We also are looking at the demographic breakdowns. And as of today, an equal number or percentage of the positive tests that we've seen in Watauga County are among the and the 25 to 49-year-olds. Previously, it was predominantly the 18 to 24-year-olds, but right now it's about 36% in both of those groups. So what that means is—
Give us that first age range you said again, because your audio cut out, and okay. I heard the 18 part, but didn't hear the rest.
So the state is tracking positives in different demographic age ranges. The first one I mentioned is ages 18 to 24. So, you know, here locally, we think about our college students, but I also think about many of our first and second year teachers who are with us in the school system. The second age range is 25 to 49. And right now we're seeing equal numbers of positive cases in our community in those two groups. Now, obviously, the concern that many people have voiced is that with the return to class at Appalachian State, we've seen all of the moving in that's occurring all throughout our community this last week or two. There is a concern about those numbers going up and that becoming an increase in community widespread. But what we are seeing right now, or what the health department is telling us, is that they're now seeing just community widespread. We're past the point of it just being person-to-person spread, and that is a concern. So in order to get back to school in person in October, we all as a community have to do the things that unfortunately I think, you know, many of us just don't want to be doing. We're all tired of this and ready to be done with this virus. But the gatherings, the different events that might be occurring, you know, we need to just continue to be safe. I know it sounds old by now, but we know the science around face masks. We know the importance of keeping some physical distance from each other and regular hand washing. So my hope is that we'll see those numbers level off and begin to decrease, that our percent positive rate will stay down around 5%, and we can revisit the question of returning to school on that 2x3 model.
A couple of questions. Talk about returning to school and remote learning. A couple of questions here. Will students be able to receive a computer to use for remote learning?
Yes, right. You know, back in the spring, we handed out enough computers for every student, I think in grades 3 through 12. And so we know we have that number of computers. Back early in the summer, I want to say around May, we ordered an additional 400 computers. I've mentioned that several times now. There is no projected date for those. So actually today we made the decision to cancel that order and to order a different set of devices, not exactly the devices that we wanted, but ones that we know that could be here in about 3 weeks. So within the first couple of weeks of the semester, we believe that every student who needs a device, including kindergarten through second grade, should be able to receive one.
A big question and concern that folks still have, and they had back in March too, folks that are having a hard time getting internet access. We know that there were some hot spots, you know, back from March to May. How is that being addressed as we enter into the new school year?
It remains a huge concern for us, and it's a great inequity all across our state. It's very frustrating to try to deal with this and to try to get all the right people together to work on this. As I said in a previous interview with you, something has to change at the regulatory level, at the state level, with funding for the providers, the protected markets, all of those things something has to change. We do have about 65, maybe 70 hotspots that we can distribute out to families who can get cell phone coverage but don't have access to high-speed internet. Of course, they can move that around with them, but we still probably have 10 to 12% of families that don't have access to high-speed internet and maybe even live in an area where they can't get internet or a cell signal. And it's a terrible situation to be in. Unfortunately, that means that for many of those families, we'll still be providing printed packets to them for them to do. But we will also open up those hot spots at our schools in parking lots. We will have the map that we did back in the spring of all the places in the community where children could go. And not at first. We want to get our staff back into school safely and begin from there. But I'm hoping that within the first few weeks of the semester, especially at the high school level, we can open up some time for small numbers of students to come in, briefly download some things, upload some assignments, and work like that. But I'll be honest with you, Kenneth, it's a huge issue for a lot of folks. I know that Skyline, SkyBest, and Blue Ridge Energy are working on some partnerships and some estimates for what it would cost to run fiber into areas like Triplet, Stony Fork, Wildcat, and other areas of our community, but we're just not where we need to be. But we'll try to be as flexible as we can with those families and to try to work with them the best we can.
And while we're on that subject, I'd like to mention too, I had an interview earlier this year, I guess it's maybe back in March now, with Senator Deanna Ballard, and she has been very involved in trying to find out where these areas, not only in Watauga County, but in her district in the high country, are not being served as well. And the committees have looked at this, and she has been very active in that too. So I just want to point that out, that the work has been going on. This is not something that is new, but unfortunately it takes a while. And
it does, and we're not the only community in North Carolina. In fact, I would say every county in North Carolina is facing this same thing. Kenneth, I meant to mention this earlier. I want to go back to some of those questions about remote learning and the virtual academy. Just today, we have updated on our website a resource page that helps to show some of the differences between what we experienced back in March and what families can expect to experience in the virtual academy or through remote learning for the first 9 weeks. With some different links there, we'll show the instructional schedules and models. So folks will go to our website, wataugaschools.org, to our coronavirus and remote learning websites to see those resources there. Hopefully that will help to also answer some of the questions.
yeah, and I'm going there right now. As a matter of fact, I'll look that up while we move along. Let's see. Sorry if we already hit on this, but let's touch on it again. Will high school students only be receiving instruction for classes meeting graduation requirements, or will it include elective classes too? I heard you mention a little bit of that a moment ago, but let's make sure and touch on that again, because that's huge.
It is huge. So students still have the state required 22 graduation required credits for graduation. And for students who are enrolled in the online, the in-person classes that are starting remotely, they are scheduled for all of their classes that they normally would be taking. And those teachers are and will be working really hard to make those courses available and accessible online. There are some exceptions. We met yesterday with our folks at Caldwell Community College. There's only so much you can do in, say, automotive, welding, things like that, and do it remotely. Again, hopefully we'll be back in person October, November for some of those hands-on labs. But for the semester-long Watauga Virtual Academy, we've still come up with a number of electives that can still be taught electronically, remotely. It's just not the same broad array, largely because of the staffing. It just isn't possible to have all of the same options for 200 students as it is to have for 1,500 students. But I'm really impressed that the high school has been able to pull together as many elective options for those students as possible. One of the questions that we hear a lot, and maybe you received it as well, is can we move between the two? If we start out in one plan and it's not working for us, or if conditions change in the community, can we move to the other? And I wish that I had a better answer, but if you could just think about what it might look like in the middle of the semester to be rescheduling students and putting them in or taking them out, it just really isn't going to be possible to do that. So we ask that people be as informed as they can, ask all the questions that they need to, and make the decision that is best for them. And then we need people to stick to it. If we in our virtual academy and the K-8 schools, for example, we have teachers that are teaching groups with 2 grade levels, maybe students from multiple schools. And if we have students that are coming out of that and then going into the in-person, or coming out of the in-person and going into that, it isn't just one student that we're talking about. It has ripple effects. And then we start taking other kids out of their classes and moving teachers around. It just isn't going to be possible. So we really ask that people really make their decision, and let's try to stick with it, at least for that first semester.
And that's the point that I wanted to bring up too. I mean, look, I get it. I have a child in the school system. So I understand a lot of these questions when you ask, or a lot of these questions that are being asked, of course, it's being asked from a, dare I say, a lone perspective. Mm-hmm. Just like Dr. Elliott said, in this case, you have to think about the bigger picture. What happens if you have 50 kids a week trying to switch in and out of all of this, trying to switch between the two, I should say? Or what if you have 100 kids? I mean, the logistics behind it is tough enough. So I know it's unfortunate for some parents that feel they, may want to switch or need to switch, but like you said, I mean, we'll have to work through this together. And just know, and I want to kind of inject something personal here, just know that the folks with the Watauga County Schools, Dr. Elliott, the Watauga County School Board, just know that they have the best interest of the children at heart. This has not been easy on anyone whatsoever. I invite you, the viewer, to go back and look at the latest school board meeting that took place. The questions that were fielded, the details that Dr. Elliott presented to the board, there was just so much to consider there. And I just kind of wanted to inject that in there because it's such a huge picture and there's so many moving parts. I'll tell you, this has been on my mind the entire time since that meeting, and you brought it up, and I never thought about this. When one of the possibilities of going back to school in person, I never thought about what happens when your substitute teachers can no longer substitute. What happens when you have, and we'd talked about this before, but what happens when you have a group of teachers that's close to retirement that says, I'm done. I'm out. What happens when you have bus drivers getting sick? I mean, there is so much there. But anyway, I digress. That's just been on my mind so much lately.
Thank you, Kenneth, for saying that. And again, I mentioned at that meeting, all the magicians out in the schools, the teachers, the principals, school bus drivers, bus garage mechanics, and all the directors and administrators working so hard to pull that together. And I will say, I do want and expect parents to ask the tough questions and to help us to make the right decisions. But I also appreciate just how many positive notes and messages and emails that our staff have received, because most people realize that this is just extraordinary. And as you said, we're really trying to make the best decisions for all the kids possible.
And I want to mention that too, because for my outlets, the WataugaOnline outlets, I deal a lot with social media. And we all know that social media can be very cruel and can be very unkind. I was very impressed with the positive feedback that came out of that meeting and the kind words that so many people had. That was very encouraging.
Thank you.
Let's move along here to two certain groups of children. What happens with pre-K kids? Will they still come in person or no?
So I said in one of our earlier interviews that a lot of things will look different from school to school and community to community in Watauga County schools, and pre-K is one of those. So our hope is to have as many of the pre-K students back in school with us as possible. And those parents should be hearing from the NC Pre-K folks, the Children's Council, or Lucy Brock, ASU, or our staff. We have a lot of relationships that make all of these programs work. In some of our schools where we have very small numbers and large rooms, it's very possible that the children will be able to come 4 days a week. In some of our programs where we have very large numbers and perhaps where the rooms aren't as big as they are in some of the schools, it's not going to be possible. And we may have to break the students up and have them come in that 2x3 model. And it may be that in some of our programs, like the new program we started at Maple School, which is specifically for children with developmental disabilities, there will be some children that we prioritize as needing to come every day, and other children that we are able to allow to come every other day or 2 days a week. The whole purpose behind that is to try to keep our numbers as small as possible and to manage the risk and to keep them as healthy and safe as possible. we get into this, we implement it, and things are going well, and we can add students, we will. But we want to make sure that we're taking small steps and trying to be as safe as possible. I know that's not a specific answer for any one family, but they will be hearing from their school or from their pre-K coordinators about that. And
So
again,
the bottom line is it's on a school by school basis.
it is, but the pre-K children are among the first group that we are trying to bring back into the building.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to do it in a safe way.
What about children with special needs? That had been addressed during the board meeting and has been talked about online some. Um, what about those kids?
Well, we know that every child, I think, I've used the word suffers by not being in school. Even normally developing children, are at their best, I believe, when they are in school. But we know that there are certain children whose services just cannot be provided remotely. And so I'm speaking specifically of our most severely and profoundly disabled children who are most often in self-contained classes in their schools. I wish that we could bring in every child with an IEP or a 504 plan who need modifications. And most of those modifications will be provided to those children remotely. It may be that they come in periodically for some kind of therapeutic service, but in the meeting, what we were talking about, at least to start with, are our most severely disabled children who need to be at school in person. And just like I mentioned with the pre-K children, that is probably going to look like smaller groups for shorter periods of time as we build up into it. Most of those children are served through our programs at Hardin Park and Watauga High School. Those teachers are actually meeting today and all through this week to come up with options and plans for how to do that, to make sure that the children are protected, that the staff are protected, and that those special needs can be met. But other children, who are in inclusion classes and who receive support services, then those special education teachers will be reaching out to those families and providing direct support to them as well.
How soon let me put two questions into one maybe. How soon would parents know their child's schedule? And if we need to break this down into two questions, we will. What about the class supply list?
To the best of my knowledge, those class supply lists are posted. If they're not, please contact your school to find out.
I think all of them were posted on August 1st. Is that correct?
That sounds about right. And also, you didn't ask, but now's the time just to make a plug for the Back to School Festival. The Back to School Festival will look different this year. It will be this Friday and Saturday as we are recording this. Go to the Back to School Festival website. I would probably include that in some of your outlets as well. And there will be specific times on Friday and Saturday for specific schools, students to show up. That's how we will be able to make them small groups. A lot of the activity will occur outside on the sidewalk, but students will still be able to get backpacks, shoes, and school supplies this Friday and Saturday. The answer to your other question is August the 10th. Our goal is to get class lists posted on August the 10th. I said to you in an earlier interview, we typically do that around August the 1st. Didn't think that would be possible this year. The delay in that is, and all of these things, have to kind of come in order. We've talked about the Watauga Virtual Academy, and now that the decision was made for the in-person students to start remotely, we're giving the Watauga Virtual Academy families until August the 5th to decide if they need or want to switch back to the in-person cohorts. So once we have that information, we'll then be able to build out the rest of those class lists and schedules and have them posted by August the 10th. High school students, we'll be able to pick those up later that week. I know freshman orientation, the drive-through freshman orientation will be later that week as well. If you have a question, feel free to call the principal or the front office at your school. But otherwise, probably around 5 p.m. on August the 10th, those class lists will be posted.
I've got just a couple of more questions here. Again, for the viewer, if you feel like that maybe we did not ask your specific question that was submitted through Facebook, I invite you to make sure and go back and watch, especially the beginning of this again, because in Dr. Elliott's initial recap, we answered a bulk of the questions right there. This one is a bit interesting to me. Someone had asked, ASU education interns, valuable resource to our schools. What kind of screening measures will be in place to ensure the safety of children and staff? I'm going to piggyback on that and say, will interns even be in the schools?
Well, we're working through that today, and we have great partnerships with ASU, and that's why we have so many fantastic teachers in our school system, because a lot of them came through the ASU program. And teachers like myself, we were all student teachers and interns at one time. That's an important part of the development of our profession. Yes, we want those interns and those student teachers to be working in our schools and with our students. We just need to do it in a safe way. The 9-week remote start is certainly going to help us with that, so that those student teachers and interns will be working probably remotely with their classes and students. We'll be screening anyone who comes to the building, just like we are screening any of the other teachers and other folks who come. The College of Education is working really hard right now with those interns and student teachers to talk to them about ways to protect themselves, make sure that they are healthy and safe. And again, we'll be just watching and monitoring all of this. We have smaller numbers of student teachers and interns in the fall. It's a very small number compared to what we typically have in the spring. That's also a good opportunity for us to work through some of this on an individual basis. But yeah, we hope to have those interns and student teachers, even if it's remote, working with our students.
All right, a couple of more questions. Once again, to you, the viewer, I apologize if there's any audio issues. That is actually out of our control as we record this through Zoom. And as we recorded on a Tuesday morning, it's now 11:45. I'm assuming Zoom is pretty busy as usual with their servers. So we apologize there, but that is out of our hands. How will exceptions be granted? Like if a child needs Monday, Tuesday school, but currently assigned to Thursday, Friday school, when this question again through Facebook, when will we find out if the exception has been granted? And I want to toss something else in there. What about attendance? Attendance is going to be counted, but do we know yet how different it is going to be than definitely from March to May, but even if you were there in person?
Yeah, two great questions. So August 10th, those class lists will come out, but if there are families who have requested that their children attend on a different day than what the alphabet would dictate, please be in touch with their principals. I know a lot of principals are communicating back with those parents right now about it. I will just say that for the most part, we probably won't be able to make a lot of exceptions or exemptions, because we're trying to balance those classes out. When we looked at the alphabet at a couple of our grade levels in one of our schools, we had classes where one group had 2 students in it and another group had 13 students in it. So by necessity, we had to pull some students out of one. If there were families in that group that had a real severe hardship of some kind, then we tried to work with those families first to do that. But there are a myriad of different reasons why it would be better for families to be on one schedule or another. I know that we've tried to accommodate some of those, but it just isn't going to be possible to accommodate all of them. Again, I'm sorry, and we'll try to do the best that we can.
The attendance question.
Attendance, we received we received an update on some policies from the state about this. It's one of the 15-point remote instruction plan elements that was given to us by the state earlier in the summer. Attendance will be taken on the 2 days when students are live with their teachers, either remotely or in person, hopefully at some point. And then attendance for the other days, it's my understanding, will be captured based on students' completion of work. So students will have work that they are assigned and will be expected to do it, and will be counted as being present by virtue of their engagement in the completion of their work. It's very different because they're not physically present or even necessarily having a face-to-face virtual meeting. But that's our understanding right now.
A question that was not on the list, but we mentioned it in our last interview, and it's important to touch on here. Remember that students are being graded on work. Not that they were not being graded in March and May, but March through May. But the guidance from the state, at the end, change the grading scale, we'll say. Well, that same model is not the case for the fall. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. As I've said in a couple of our conversations now, this is real school. Now, you know, we are very mindful that this is very different than having school in person, and our teachers understand that. But we have important curriculum to cover. Our students need to continue their learning and continue to be engaged academically. There will be assignments that are made and given to students, assignments that are collected, and grades that are taken. That again is one of the requirements from the state's remote instruction plan, is that we have a plan for how to do that. Now, I also, have been communicating to our teachers and to our principals. We know that our first priority is helping our students to get situated, to welcome them back to the school year, and to helping to reassure their questions, their concerns, their anxiety about starting school in this very different way. And then we will gradually begin the learning of new content and materials as we go. But there will be accountability for all of us in this new remote instruction. All the more reason that we need to work together and communicate well, and that we want our students to be back in school as soon as possible.
All right, two more quick things. Lunches and meals. Give us the final number of the lunches that were served from March to May.
Right off the top of my head, it was over 249,000 meals that were
Wow.
served from March the 17th until the end of July. Thank you to those extraordinary folks in our child nutrition and our transportation department for making those meals, handing them out at curbside, delivering those meals all throughout the community. It was just heroic efforts on their part. As we sit here today, we do not know from the state what the meal plan will be moving forward. We're hoping that some additional funding and some additional flexibility will come to the state that will allow us to operate a meal program very similar to what we did. We just don't know that right now. Right now, we're operating, if nothing changes, under the normal meal program. And we'll need to figure out how do we provide meals? Will it be taking orders? Will it be for our free and reduced lunch children? I hesitate to speculate because we just don't know yet, but we're continuing to advocate at the state level that we be able to have a meal program very similar to what we did back in the spring.
And last but certainly not least, from all of the questions that we got from Facebook, and then I'll let Dr. Elliott kind of recap everything. I appreciate your time today. We're trying to keep this under an hour, but we're closing in on that mark already. We had a question from Facebook: what will happen to middle school volleyball this year? Let's paint the broader picture. And what about athletics and after school activities that would normally happen in general?
Yeah, great question, because we know that athletics are such an important part of many students' school experience. And I have two little athletes at home that are asking me these questions almost on a daily basis. And the answer is right now, we don't know. Our middle school athletic programs, and that's, all the things that we would do in the fall with cross country, football, cheerleading, volleyball, as you mentioned, maybe even looking into basketball season. We are likely to follow whatever it is that the North Carolina High School Athletic Association decides for our high school sports. And it is our understanding that the High School Association has not yet made a decision about the seasons for those fall sports. And at the high school, it's even more volleyball, golf, cross country, football, and others. We have moved into what they call the phase 2 return to play, which means that students who are coming for athletic conditioning can now share a limited amount of equipment. Think about throwing a football or catching a baseball, no contact, not being able to be close to each other, things like that. I want to, again, praise all of our coaches for all of the precautions that they have been taking. And so far, those have been very successful in those summer workouts. We're hopeful for a fall athletic season for middle school and high school, but our middle school season will follow suit with the high school program.
All right. Well, I think that covers all of the questions that I received through social media. Let me turn the floor over to you for a recap and anything that you think we might have missed. Again, we are recording this on Tuesday, August the 4th, and we are just shy of 12 noon as we have been talking about the return to schools, which happens, 2 weeks?
August the 17th.
August 17th. That's a Monday, by the way, for those playing along at home.
I think we covered a lot, Kenneth, and I know that there was a lot right there at the beginning of the interview about the differences between the in-person 2x3 and the Watauga Virtual Academy. Just to recap that, we have information on our website that has helped to answer some of those questions that have come in from parents. We greatly appreciate those questions that we have received. Just to oversimplify the answer, generally speaking, both groups of students will follow a very similar instructional model with 2 days of engagement directly with a teacher, followed by 3 days of remote work and assignments, with Wednesdays being a day that all classes might be able to come together, or that small groups or individuals could get help virtually with a teacher. I would just say that I appreciate the grace and flexibility from our parents, and that we just want open communication with folks. We ask people to be in touch with their principals and with their teachers. Remember that our teachers are working hard through this. This isn't the situation that they wanted to be in either. Let's all just work together and be kind to one another. And let's continue to realize that the future of school depends on the future of this community. And we need to be healthy. We need to take personal responsibility for making the decisions to try to minimize this virus, and then allow us to make the decisions to get our students back into school. Last thing I want to say is these children have precious few years to be in school. And even though this is very different, this is a year of school for them. And I would just ask that we all try to do all that we can to make it as positive and exciting and supportive for those children as possible. This is a year that they'll never forget.
You're exactly right. And I want to also say that on behalf of the folks that gave the positive vibes, the positive words about the school board, the administrators, teachers, staff, and you, Dr. Elliott, for all the hard work that's gone in to not just from March to May, but now as we enter this great unknown, if you will. I just want to say thank you. Thank all of y'all for your hard work. It is not an easy job whatsoever. And I kind of laugh, for lack of a better thing to do, because, once upon a time, Dr. Elliott and I are in close communication during the winter months when we have snow days. And I think he and I both kind of long to get back to that normal of the hardest decision of the day being, do we have school because of snow or not?
Kind of puts things in perspective.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Scott Elliott, Superintendent of Watauga County Schools. I'm Kenneth Reese, founder, owner, and operator of WataugaOnline.com. Thank you for your time today as a viewer, and we will catch up with Dr. Elliott again soon. And until then, everyone, stay safe.